Finished up the wiring last night. Hooked up a Naomi. I've got 5.01 volts going into the Naomi, so my voltage is good. RCA out to the sound amp, which is the box on the left here. Power supply is the box on the right. Original House of the Dead 2 motherboard with no cart is below. Well, here's the gun board, which I chose not to hook up for this experiment. And there is the JVS I/O board. Turns out that it is booting. I can hear the boot sound, but I've tried two PC monitors hooked up via VGA, and both of them give an indication that they don't like the signal they're getting. I have the dip switches set for VGA, so I'm not sure what's up with that. I will need to double check my dip switch settings. What I did was base it on this, which is the Naomi with compact flash adapter that I put into my Blast City arcade cabinet, which has a tri-res monitor, and it is set for VGA, so I've matched the dip switch settings. I got my lit start buttons. Of course, they're not going to light up because there's no game. So 4 wires. One's voltage to this lit button that then loops through to the other lit button. Then there's a separate control line for each button that will cause the lights to blink. Then there is a ground that goes to this button, and then daisy chains over to this button. And then there's a wire for each button that connects the actual switchgram when you press the switch. All those connect to the JVS I/O, which has voltage going in, 5 volts coming in through CN7 connector, voltage and ground. USB goes to the Naomi, and then this is the analog part of the loom. Analog controls to the guns. This is digital. It supplies power, grounds, and then the buttons, the switches, control lines to make the lit switches flash, etc., etc. A huge amount of wiring here. And out of range. I'm a little bit disappointed with the sound. The audio I thought would be really good, but it's kind of scratchy. I am using inside the cabinet. I wired up this, so maybe the volume pot there is a bit dirty or something. I'm not exactly sure. But again, without playing a game, I can't tell how bad the sound is. It does sound a little bit too bright, I'll say. Too much treble and a little bit staticky, but without a game or tweaking the volume knob, because all I can do is put power on and off to make the boot sound happen at this point. But at least I know I've got my power wiring to the point where the JVS I/O seems to be working. I can hear the boot sounds. I got good voltages. So what's left is the plates for the guns, should be arriving any day. And then to wire up the guns, 2 connectors that will match at the bottom of the cabinet. And those are just these little 9-pin connectors that I put on there. One issue I had, and I don't think it's part of the sound crackling, but it's definitely part of why one channel didn't work originally when I plugged it in. I ordered from DigiKey the pins for these Japanese connectors, amp connectors or Tyco connectors, it depends what people call them. And I found that some of the ones I had from DigiKey that were connected by metal strip Those seem to fit in nice and tight in the connectors, but then I also ordered some different gauge ones that I end up having to use that were just loose in the bag. And when I crimp those on, although they look the same to me visually, they don't stay in the connector. So one wire going to the left speaker had backed out, and other than trying to order some more pins, I'm not sure what to do about that. I am reusing old connectors pulled off of an old harness that I bought on eBay years ago. It might be that the combination of the new pins and the old harness is the problem, or old connector. So if I ordered a new, what is that, an 8-pin connector, if I ordered a new pin connector, the new pins might snap in better to the new connector. That's my thinking on that at the moment. So I might order a new connector to get that fixed, because maybe the speakers are a little bit off because it's just not making a good connection. I think I also used one of those on the gun connectors that I built. There might be 1 or 2 pins in there that are loose too, so I'll have to check that. Other than that, I have a gun protection board that I didn't hook up, because you have problems with these guns. When the guns get a short, it will cause the 12-volt input that goes into the gun board to fry parts on the gun board. So there's 2 ways to fix it. One way is to put a 1/2 amp fuse on the 12-volt line, so it'll blow that fuse before damaging the board. The other one is a gun protection board, which it's in the green box that all this stuff is sitting on right now. A gun protection board that has some resistors and capacitors and things on it that helps against voltage spikes, that plugs into where the 2 guns plug in. Then it's a small rectangular board, and then it plugs into the I/O board there where the guns normally plug into. So I will be using that to save the gun board. I have 3 gun boards. At least one of them is a different revision, a newer revision. And I can't remember if I tested all of them or any of them, so that still needs to be done. And then this video issue. Online, supposedly you should get a video, the Naomi boot screen, even if you don't have a game cartridge installed. So why I'm getting out of range on one monitor and the other one said something about incompatible signal or something, unless I have my dip switches wrong. I'm not sure why that's happening. I know Naomi VGA signal I've read on some large screen LCDs and plasmas. Some of them it has a problem with the signal, and some it doesn't. I've also read something about that might be related to the sync, separate syncs or composite sync. So that's something I have to look into as well, because my plan was to use a large LCD, buy it cheap off Craigslist for the video, and even though it'll be 16 by 9 instead of 4 by 3, from what I've seen online, it doesn't make that much of a difference in these games, and I'm somebody who's really susceptible to watching 4 by 3 content stretched to 16 by 9. It just drives me crazy. But I've seen it with people playing House of the Dead 2, and I don't seem to really notice it, so we'll see. If it's a problem, I am supposing that I could just set the TV to show it 4 by 3, and there'll be black lines, and maybe I'll adjust the bezel accordingly. But that's still, I gotta get this thing up and running before I even think about what kind of display I'm going to use. And then, of course, like I said, all this wiring and all of these boxes have to fit somewhere. The pedestal lid is screwed down. It does not hinge. If I was designing this, I would have made that thing hinge so you could lift it up and get to the inside of it. There is room in there where I could mount some of the stuff, but if it ever had a problem or you needed to unplug something, you wouldn't be able to get to it because it's, you know, it's inside the cabinet. There's this small hole in the front, but I can get my hand in there, but not with holding a tool or anything. It's just an open hand. I can just barely slide in there. so that's useless for maintenance. And like I said, there is quite a bit of room in there. You could mount the gun board, the I/O board, power supply can mount, all kinds of stuff in there, but not with the current layout. One thing I could do is take out the lower coin box. If I take that coin box out, I'll have to mount the sound and test switches on the side wall, which would be okay. But if I take that box out, then anything that fits through that space can go in there and you'll have easy access to. So the more I think about it, the more I'm tempted to just take that coin box out. I believe it's 4 screws, 3 or 4 screws. Upper ones are easy to get to. The bottom ones are a pain in the neck. They are under those slits, so you have to get a wrench down in the slit and loosen them up so you can pull the coin box out. And then of course, if anybody ever puts a quarter in the coin slot, it would fall onto anything you put down there. So you'd have to make sure you either told people, hey, don't put anything in there, or maybe take the coin mechanisms out and put some kind of block in front of them, or maybe even just make a really small chute that just goes from that hole. I've got the light on. Those 2 holes are what lines up with the coin slots. Just make those go into a tube straight down. So if you put something in, at least they go into a tube straight down. And if the tube ever fills up, it'll jam the coin mechs. You open it up and you'll see you'll have a problem and it won't be landing on anything. If I put boards on side or back walls and the power supply and sound amp on the floor, it wouldn't be such a big deal if quarters hit it. Well, I guess the sound amp has holes that are about coin size, so a coin might fall through the slots. The power supply, pretty much the back for the fan, is about the only chance a coin would have to go in. And then of course you have to worry about cooling if you do that, because now you've got your power supply with that fan and the audio board inside the pedestal. And where's your airflow going to come from? There's no airflow in the front through the coin door. There's no airflow on the top, because once you screw the speakers in and put the grills and the buttons, there's no holes in the top. So the only place you're going to get airflow is that hole in the bottom. Now, one thing I could do is, when I make an extension that comes off of this to whatever device, 2x4s or whatever I'm going to use to hold the monitor, I could put a fan down there. I could very easily put a fan over that hole, say blowing air in, and then up here on top of the cabinet I might very well chop a hole and put a vent, so that hot air would vent out there, cold air come down into the bottom, and that would be a good solution. Again, this is for home use. If it ever got into an arcade like that, people could put stuff up into the vent, which might be a problem. Also, the vent can't be, well, yeah, I'm not sure if I could put the vent really high, because you see there is a platform in here that separates the speaker area from the rest of the cab. There is a hole for the wires, so hot air would actually come up through there. So it might be possible to put the vent, well, yeah, then again, you've got a post that divides the right and left hand side. So if you put a vent, you'd have to basically put like a small vent on the back of each section to get the air out. You couldn't put it in the middle because it has this piece of wood. So yeah, all these things I'm trying to overcome that are related to running this in a pedestal instead of the actual arcade cabinet. The arcade cabinet came off of this and was a giant box, and the monitor sat on top of the box, so you had, 3-4 feet or whatever of height that you could put all the electronics in. So that's where I'm at now. Unknown video issue. Sound is a little bit iffy, and pretty good, I guess. First power on, nothing smoked. Everything seems to be humming along, and like I said, good voltages, just over 5 volts. One thing, my power cable is a PC power cable that goes into a 3-pin connector that goes into the power supply. I am currently not running a line filter or a fuse, which is not really good. For testing, I should be fine, but before I start actually shooting, using the guns and stuff like that, I probably should look into getting a line filter and an actual fuse on that, just in case something happens, so I don't blow everything up after all the work. So, another quick update, making more progress.